So, although those pesky Christians were right after all rolls off the tongue quite easily, it does not adequately outline the hypothetical situation we now find ourselves in, not least in terms of the nature of this God we find ourselves before. Not only that, but we've now found that we survive our physical death, which in itself is going to take some getting used to, I would imagine. So with what little I have to go on, I'd most likely start with a lot of questions. First question would be, am I really dead? Second question would be, as it turns out, I have an identity and a consciousness that exists without my physical form. So where was I before I was alive in a human body? Third question would be, could I see some identification, please? After all, this is a highly unusual situation I now find myself in, and I'd like to know, a few basic facts about my predicament. My fourth point would be, it's been explained to me that you are a Christian God and that I'm here to be judged for my earthly conduct. Basically, I've been told that those pesky Christians were right after all, and so I'd like to know which Christians and what exactly were they right about, other than that you exist and you feel compelled to judge me. My fifth question would be, how well does the Bible represent you? Your wishes and your intentions. It's patently obvious, due to certain glaring contradictions and a few petty obsessions, that there's more than one hand at work. So, did you write, influence, or otherwise endorse any or all of the Bible? In which case, which passages? My next question, depending on the answer to the last one, would be, are you the only God? I only ask because you mentioned that we are to have no other gods before you, so I'm interested to know if there are others and how you get along. I would certainly echo the sentiments of Bertrand Russell, why didn't you provide more evidence? I think I'd go a little bit further and say something like, why didn't you simply make the fact of your existence and the rules by which we should live in order to be in your favour irrefutable? Instead, the only accounts I had to go on seemed every bit as unlikely, as absurd, and as patently man-made as any of the other religions which I now know are false. I'd ask him, why did you make it seem as though you either didn't exist or were so indifferent as to make the fact of your existence purely academic? I'd ask him, why did you entrust the details of your revelation to superstitious illiterate desert tribes in an obscure language and culture, rather than to a people and a language better able to communicate it? Why not reveal yourself universally and simultaneously, so that only a fool could doubt your existence? Why did you go to such pains to make it seem, viewing every objective piece of evidence at our disposal, as if complex life evolved gradually from simpler life and before that non-life chemistry, if in fact you created all life as it is at one time? Why is life evolving now if it didn't before? Where did you come from? These pesky Christians who were right after all keep telling us that nothing can come from nothing. So how about that? Are you a loving God? If the whole of the Old Testament is true, then that doesn't seem to fit with any definition of loving I recognise, and the dictionary seems to agree with me here. And if only the New Testament is true, then how is it that your son, you in the flesh, believed that the Old Testament was true? Can you explain the Trinity to me, please? What is it between you and the Jews? If you made Adam from dust, why did you have to impregnate Mary to create Jesus? Why didn't you intervene more often, for example, when the translation of the Bible into other languages, an act I can only assume you wholeheartedly endorsed, was being so violently suppressed by those who supposedly represented you? What are my options now? Given that I'm only now convinced of your existence, doubting it as I did during my time on Earth, based purely on available evidence, which you have to admit was scant, and the application of reasoning faculties with which I was endowed through no fault of my own, how will I be judged? Given all of the above, how am I to be judged? I've lived a good life, I've done right by my fellow man, I've helped those in need, I've been a faithful and loving husband and father, and I've been honest. Why didn't you get yourself some better PR people? I mean, Kent Hovind, come on. Well, what are we calling God here? I'll go with the definition I found that I could actually find myself believing in the supernatural creator and overseer of the universe. However, I don't really consider the term supernatural has any value, since the supernatural is nothing more than the natural without understanding. So I modify my definition of God slightly to beyond our current understanding, creator and overseer of the universe. Sorry, it's long-winded. It's no mere pedantry. I'm echoing Clarke's third law here, which states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, or to put it another way, witchcraft to the ignorant, simple science to the learned. Since this is clearly an advanced civilization or an intelligence, technology capable of creating a universe, then I guess I'd have to go with some demonstration of that kind of technology. Even creating another solar system, would get my attention. That's definitely getting there. Since you're talking about a theistic God, then it would have to be, in response to a prayer by the followers of that particular theism. I mean, even, growing a limb in front of my eyes in response to a prayer, just then and then, that would, I'd sit up and listen at that point. Or something a bit more nerdy, like a message inscribed on each subatomic particle in the universal language of mathematics, which said something like copyright God, industries, all rights reserved, or something. I'm being flippant, but something like that. I think its goals are certainly admirable. The respect religions enjoyed historically and still enjoys, and the influence it's able to exert as a result is without doubt a bad thing, so that needs to be challenged. Paraphrasing Sam Harris, we have dogmatic adherence to Bronze Age scripture, which makes incompatible claims depending on which one you believe, and that's combined in a technological civilization where we have weapons capable of annihilating entire civilizations. I respect the rights and the dignity of individuals as long as they do no harm, but beliefs should only be respected in relation to their merits. If not the religious themselves, then certainly the religions should be subjected to the same level of scepticism that we exercise in our everyday lives. I don't see that the new atheist movement does anything other than that, and if that means being disrespectful or causing offence, then I'm afraid that's too bad. The right to offend in the pursuit of truth and progress and ultimately survival is far greater than the right to be offended. And if your beliefs can't hold up to normal everyday scrutiny, then you can't simply hide behind respect or claim you're offended and get out of jail free. That's just no longer acceptable. Other than admitting to the minister who married my wife and I that I wasn't a believer, I would say no. However, my atheism is a result of critical thinking applied to holy texts, as well as the existence of a God being as depicted therein or otherwise. So my decisions about specific subject matter covered in scripture has certainly been affected by my lack of a belief in the holy origin of the texts. For example, gay rights. The Bible treats homosexuality as though it were a lifestyle choice and prescribes macabre sentences to those who practice it. Since I don't consider scripture to be God-inspired, God-given in any way, I'm free to question this supposition and conclude that homosexuality is a matter of nature rather than nurture. As it happens, science backs me up on this point, but even if it didn't, I'm not obliged to consider what is moral in scriptural terms. For me, it's simply a question of suffering and happiness, so any private sexual act or sexual thought or urge between consenting adults is none of my concern or anyone else's. I think the two are inextricably linked. Gaining true beliefs nullifies contradictory false beliefs in the same subject. It could be argued that this is a question of consequences, since beliefs inform actions and actions usually have consequences. So then it would be a case of whether these consequences adversely affect the happiness or suffering of others, and if the answer is no, then we could conclude that the belief is harmless. However, regardless of what the belief is, it is how it's arrived at and whether it's susceptible to change that is the most important point here. The evidence is all around us that beliefs are most likely to be true when they're based on sound, evidence-based critical thinking. And it follows that the more true our beliefs, the better informed our decisions will be. If a person expresses beliefs that are not critically arrived at and will not bow to the weight of contradictory evidence, we each have a duty to question how that belief was acquired, since not doing so, we nurture a culture of belief in false propositions and ill-informed decisions. Everything we have that is good comes from informed beliefs, and everything we have that is bad comes from ignorance. And when we don't know, it's okay to say so.